Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of Gods, Monsters, and Libraries. We're wrapping up our look at the Greek mythology side of the Gods and Monsters universe by offering you this companion text to go with your enjoyment of series like Percy Jackson and the Olympians. This book, Classical Myth by Barry B. Powell, is an excellent resource. It's one of many. The Greek gods and goddesses and all the legends have been around for centuries, a couple thousand years actually. But what makes it really sort of interesting is you can dig into all of this backstory that's only hinted at, in series like Percy Jackson for your own personal enjoyment. Now, as I said, there are a lot of different books out there on the market, but I really like a textbook like this one because it really gets into a lot of the cultural reasons, like a lot of the reasons why did we invent these gods and goddesses in the first place. Now, it depends on what you may believe, and I'm certainly not going to tell you to believe one way or the other, but depending on how you feel, the Greeks at the time certainly believed absolutely that Zeus and Poseidon and Hades were actual real tangible beings, or real beings of power. Much like in modern day, depending on your religion or your faith, you might believe in God. And once again, I'm not saying God is real or God is not real, or the Greek gods are not real. That's something that you can decide for yourself. Personally, I really enjoy the idea that there's something a little bit larger out there than the rest of us. Not only that, Greek gods and goddesses are kind of an exciting thing. And if you wanted a little bit of trivia, the modern-day city of Athens is actually named after the Greek goddess Athena. Interesting. All of our days of the week, too, named after gods and goddesses. Very interesting. So, if you like that kind of thing, if you're like, really? I want to learn more about that, then this is the kind of resource for you. As I said, Percy Jackson runs into creatures like Medusa or the Minotaur, but a book like this explains really where did they come from, what are they doing, and what are the cultural contexts. For instance, Zeus, master of lightning and master of the sky, may have been invented as people wanted a reason to understand where lightning comes from. Or Poseidon, god of the sea, if ships were wrecked at sea or the seas were really violent and terrible because of a storm, people might want a reason. Why did that ship sink? Well, they must have angered Poseidon somehow. And similarly, when we die, people may have wondered, well, where did they go? Well, they go down to the realm and Hades cares for them. Interesting. Now, what this textbook does is it talks about all of that sort of side of it, all of those factors and all of those bits to it, but it also gives you a lot of history on where it all came from. So there are images about some of the classical places mentioned in the Percy Jackson series, and others, Greek myths and mythology. It gives you images from some of the artwork over human history that's been covered, where the myths themselves came from, the cultures, how each culture will adapt to a different myth. But it also gives these interesting perspective pieces. And what this thing does is it talks to artists, philosophers, even filmmakers like George Lucas, who did Star Wars. It says, how did these myths impact your work? So it's nice. So not only do we get, the old historical myths, but we actually get a little bit of more of a modern day telling and a little bit more of a modern day take on it by talking to people who have been impacted by the power of myth. So all the films and all the movies that you like, chances are at some point or another they've come across these Greek myths and put them into their TV shows or movies. And the more you read, the more you know, the more you sort of pick up on it. Now, if you're like me and you love the Percy Jackson series, one thing that I cannot stress enough is sometimes it's better to read a book like this first. Because that way when you get to the stuff of Percy Jackson, you can say, I know exactly what that's all about. I know who these creatures are. I know their entire story. Now, while Percy gives a bit of backstory on each of the creatures and gods and goddesses that he encounters, it's nice to get the historical, accurate version first, and then compare and see how strong of a job that Rick Riordan has done. And who knows, maybe it'll inspire you too. Classical Myth, Barry B. Powell. This is the second edition. There are several other editions available, many other mythology textbooks out there that you can jump into to get a full, accurate picture of the world of Percy Jackson. I highly recommend it. For Gods, Monsters, and Libraries, I'm Brian Wilkinson.